On the edge of the galaxy, far from the bustling human colonies, lay a planet called Vexa 5. It was a desolate world, with cracked earth and skies filled with dust. No one lived here. It was a forgotten place, avoided by all but the most desperate. On this barren world, an alien named Zayla had wandered for days, hungry, thirsty, and alone. Zayla was a member of the Xylarian race, known for their strong, tough appearance. His blue skin, sharp features, and tall stature made him look intimidating to most, but there was nothing intimidating about his situation. Abandoned by his own people, left to die on this cold, empty planet, Zayla had become a shadow of the proud warrior he once was. His people had seen him as weak, as an outcast, and so they left him behind when they went off to fight in distant galaxies. He had been cast away, left to wander with no purpose. But everything changed the day a human ship landed on Vexa 5. Zayla had seen ships before, but humans were different. They had always been feared by many alien races. Their reputation was one of violence, greed, and strength. Yet, here they were, on a planet where no one else would dare to go. The ship landed with a soft thud, kicking up clouds of dust as it touched the ground. Zayla, weak from hunger and exhaustion, barely had the strength to stand. He could barely make out the figures moving from the ship toward him, but one stood out from the rest. A human male, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a dark spacesuit with the emblem of a human captain on his chest. His name was Captain Jason Marshall. Jason's eyes scanned the dusty horizon before they landed on Zayla. The alien was on his knees, barely able to move, his skin a pale blue from days of exposure to the harsh elements. Without hesitation, Jason stepped forward. There was no fear in his eyes, only determination and compassion. "Hey there," Jason said, his voice calm, carrying over the wind. "You all right?" Zayla couldn't believe what he was hearing. The human wasn't speaking to him like he was an enemy or a monster. There was no hatred, no fear, only curiosity and care. For the first time in days, Zayla felt something stir inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Jason knelt beside him, his movements steady and sure. "I'm Captain Jason Marshall of the Starship Vanguard. We've come to help. Can you walk?" Zayla blinked, his mind trying to process the words. This human was offering help. It was almost too much for him to understand. He had been taught to believe that humans would never show kindness to someone like him, an outcast, an alien. But Jason wasn't like the stories. He didn't see Zayla as an enemy. He saw him as someone in need of help. With Jason's assistance, Zayla managed to stand, his legs shaking beneath him. He had no strength left, but Jason's arm around his shoulder gave him the support he needed. Zayla, still too weak to speak, followed the human back to the ship. As they moved toward the ship, Zayla felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of belonging. He had been alone for so long, abandoned by his own people, but here was a human, someone who had no reason to help him, choosing to show kindness instead of hatred. Inside the ship, Zayla was given food and water. Jason's crew members, a mix of humans and aliens from various races, worked together in perfect harmony, providing Zayla with everything he needed to recover. They didn't question his past. They didn't judge him for what he had been or for the species he was born into. They treated him like any other crew member, like an equal. It was strange for Zayla, but it was a feeling he began to savor. As the days passed, Zayla grew stronger. He could feel his strength returning with every meal, every moment of rest. Jason and his crew made sure he was well cared for, and in return, Zayla did his best to help with the ship's repairs and daily tasks. It wasn't easy for him, his skills were rusty, and he still struggled with his emotions. But slowly, he began to trust them. Slowly, he began to feel a bond form between them. One evening, as the stars flickered outside the ship's windows, Zayla and Jason sat together, watching the galaxy pass by. It was a peaceful moment, and Zayla found himself lost in thought. "You're a long way from home," Jason said, his voice low but friendly. "What happened to you?" Zayla hesitated. The pain of his past still lingered. His people had abandoned him. They had seen him as weak, unworthy of being part of their mighty race. They had left him to die, stranded on this forsaken planet. He had no family, no friends. He was alone, my people. "They left me," Zayla said quietly, his voice barely a whisper. "They thought I was weak, so they abandoned me here." Jason didn't say anything for a long moment, just sat there quietly beside him. Zayla wondered if he had said too much. But then Jason spoke. "You know," Jason said with a small smile, "sometimes people don't realize how strong they are until they're tested. You're not weak, Zayla. You're strong. You survived out here on your own. That says a lot." Zayla looked at him, surprised by the human's words. No one had ever spoken to him like that before. Jason wasn't just offering was showing understanding. For the first time in so long, Zayla felt seen. He wasn't just an alien. He was someone who mattered, and in that moment, Zayla realized something. This human, Jason Marshall, wasn't just offering him help. He was offering him something much more valuable: acceptance. The bond between them, unexpected as it was, had begun to form in the vastness of the universe, where alien races waged wars and fought for dominance. This small act of kindness would set in motion something far greater than either of them could have ever imagined. The unexpected bond between a human and an alien had just begun. Days passed, and Zayla began to settle into his new life aboard the human ship. He had been given a new name among the crew, one that was free from the stigma of his past new beginning. Jason had been kind, treating him with respect and showing him that humans weren't all the monsters his people had described. But as the days wore on, Zayla felt a strange pull inside him, a pull toward something he couldn't quite understand. It was loyalty, something that had never seemed important to him until now. The ship Vanguard moved through space with purpose, traveling toward an unknown mission. The crew members, despite being from different backgrounds and species, worked together as a family. It was a strange concept for Zayla, who had been abandoned by his own kind, but it felt right. The humans had given him something he thought he'd lost forever, a sense of belonging. But would this feeling of loyalty last, or would the harsh realities of his past catch up with him? One afternoon, Jason called Zayla into his quarters. The captain was standing near the star charts, looking serious. His usually calm demeanor was replaced with urgency. "Zayla," Jason began, his voice firm, "we've got a situation. A faction of your people, the Xylarians, are on the move. They're coming to this sector, and we have intel suggesting they're looking for someone who may have betrayed them. Do you know anything about this?" Zayla froze. The mention of his people made his heart race. He had been trying to forget them, trying to move past the betrayal they had dealt him, but now it seemed they were coming for him. His past was catching up with him far quicker than he had anticipated. I don't know what you mean," Zayla said, his voice strained. "I've had no contact with them." I was left on Vexa 5 to die. Jason turned to face him. His eyes softened, but there was still a serious edge to his words. I understand, but we need to make a decision, Zayla. If they're coming after you, we may have to fight. You'll have to choose where your loyalty lies. The question hit Zayla like a hammer. His mind raced as he thought about his options. He could choose to stand by the humans who had shown him kindness, the ones who had accepted him as family. But the thought of confronting his people, the ones who had abandoned him, made him feel sick. What if they saw him as weak? What if they saw him as a traitor for aligning with the humans? Jason could sense the conflict in Zayla's eyes. You don't have to decide right away, but the choice is coming. When the Xylarians arrive, you'll need to decide where you stand. Zayla left Jason's quarters, his mind whirling. He paced the narrow hallways of the ship, thinking. The Xylarians had always been proud, strong, and unforgiving. He had never fit in with them. He had always been the outcast, the one who didn't belong. But to turn his back on them completely felt like he was turning his back on who he was, even if they had done the same to him. It was a bitter pill to swallow. Days passed, and the tension on the ship grew. The crew had begun to prepare for the possible arrival of the Xylarians. Weapons were checked, defenses were strengthened, and Zayla was put to work with the crew. But all the while, his mind was consumed by the choice he had to make. Would he stand with the humans who had shown him the loyalty he'd never known? Or would he return to his people, despite the pain they had caused him? As the day of the Xylarians' arrival approached, Jason sought out Zayla again. This time, he didn't ask about loyalty or what Zayla's decision would be. Instead, he simply placed a hand on Zayla's shoulder. I know this isn't easy, Jason said softly, but remember, this loyalty isn't just about where you come from. It's about who you choose to stand with, and we stand with each other. Zayla nodded, though his heart still felt torn. The human captain had spoken with such sincerity, and for the first time, Zayla felt a small flicker of hope. Jason wasn't asking him to forget his past. He was asking him to choose who he wanted to be. That choice was more powerful than any bloodline or heritage. The Xylarians arrived soon after, their ships arriving in the distant star system, and the vanguard was ready. Jason had called for a meeting with the crew, and all eyes were on Zayla. As he stepped into the briefing room, his people, the Xylarians, were dangerous, ruthless, and determined. But now, Zayla wasn't sure if they were still his people. Would he fight for them? Would he betray the humans who had saved him? Jason stood at the front. The crew gathered around. Zayla, he said, we've got to make a stand. I need you to be with us on this. Whatever happens, you have our loyalty. Now, we need yours. The weight of the decision fell on Zayla, like a crushing wave. He had always been alone. He had never known loyalty, never understood its true meaning. But now, standing before these humans, his new family, he realized something. Loyalty wasn't about blood, it was about trust, about standing by those who stood by you. Zayla stood, tall, his chest swelling with a sense of clarity he had never known. I'm with you, he said, his voice strong. I've spent my life running from my past, but I won't run anymore. My loyalty is with the vanguard. My loyalty is with you. The crew erupted in applause, their cheers echoing through the ship. For the first time in his life, Zayla felt what it truly meant to belong. His choice was made, and he would stand by it no matter what came next. As the vanguard prepared for battle, Zayla's heart was calm. He had found a new family, one he would fight for, protect, and cherish. and whatever the Xylarians brought, he would face it with them. The vanguard was now fully prepared. The crew moved with precision, gathering at their posts as the Xylarians' ships moved ever closer. Their dark, menacing ships loomed on the ship's radar, their engines glowing ominously in the distance. The tension in the air was palpable. Even though the humans on the ship had their plans and strategies ready, everyone knew that this battle could change everything. Zayla's heart beat in his chest like a drum, but for once, it wasn't fear that drove it was purpose. Jason had gathered the crew in the ship's command center, the walls flickering with digital screens displaying vital information. Zayla stood at the back, watching as Jason briefed everyone on their strategy. He had earned his place among the crew, no longer the alien outcast, but a trusted member of the vanguard. "We know the Xylarians are coming with force," Jason said, his voice steady and commanding. "They won't hesitate, but we've learned from them. We've studied their tactics, and we're going to hit them where it hurts the most, right in the heart of their fleet." Zayla felt his throat tighten. This was the moment he had been preparing for. The Xylarians were coming for him, not only to fight the humans, but to claim him back. Zayla could feel the weight of their eyes upon him. He had betrayed them. He had chosen the humans over his own people. But now, his new family was depending on him. Jason looked directly at Zayla. "This is going to be a test. Zayla, we need your knowledge. Your people will not be forgiving. If they think we've turned you, they'll do everything they can to destroy us." Zayla nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of the situation. He was no longer just a passenger on this ship. He was a key part of the fight, a symbol of everything that could change if humans and aliens stood together. But that meant facing his past, the very people who had abandoned him. The first wave of Xylarians arrived faster than expected. The ship's sensors went wild, alarms blaring as enemy ships approached. Xyla's pulse quickened, and a part of him hesitated. Should he call out to his people? Should he warn them about the human fleet? Would they listen? But then he remembered something Jason had said. Loyalty isn't about blood, it's about trust. And Zayla had chosen his family. He had chosen Jason, and that decision meant something. It meant standing beside those who had given him a new chance. He wasn't about to turn his back on them now. Jason's voice cut through his thoughts. "Get to your stations. This is it." The vanguard crew sprang into action. Zayla, now an active part of the team, moved to his post alongside Myra, one of the human crew members who had become a close friend. Myra gave him a nod of reassurance, though her eyes were sharp, her focus unwavering. "Ready for this?" she asked, her voice a little too calm considering the circumstances. Zayla met her gaze. "I'll do what I have to." The Xylarians had started their assault. Their ships opened fire, sending waves of energy blasts toward the vanguard. The shields of the human ship shimmered with each impact, but they held strong. Jason's voice rang out over the comms, his tone filled with determination. "Now, all crew to battle stations. Take the Xylarians down before they can regroup." The battle had begun in earnest. Zayla's hands were steady as he worked alongside Mira to manage the ship's weapon system. The roar of the energy cannons firing echoed throughout the ship, and Zayla could see the enemy fleet begin to break apart under the relentless attack. The humans weren't backing down. They were fighting with everything they had, but Zayla couldn't ignore the other truth burning in his chest. His people were among the enemy. He was fighting against his own kind. The Xylarians were powerful, ruthless in their pursuit of control. Their ships were equipped with technology that surpassed anything the humans had ever encountered. But the Vanguard was quick and nimble, the crew working in perfect sync. It was clear that the humans were outmatched in numbers, but they had something the Xylarians didn't: unity. They were not fighting alone, and Xyla knew he would fight with them, no matter the cost. But just as it seemed like they might have the upper hand, the Xylarians launched their next tactic, a massive EMP burst designed to disable the Vanguard's systems. The ship's lights flickered, and for a moment everything went dark. "Report," Jason shouted, his voice demanding answers. "We've lost power to several systems, Captain," Mia responded, her voice tense but controlled. "Engines are down, shields are down. We need backup." Zayla's heart raced. This was it. If they didn't act quickly, the Vanguard would be destroyed, and with it, the hope of peace. The Xylarians were closing in for the kill. In that moment, Zayla realized something deep within himself. His loyalty to the humans wasn't just about who had saved him. It was about what they stood for. They stood for trust, for protecting the weak, for giving people second chances. His people, the Xylarians, had never offered him that. They had abandoned him. They had seen him as nothing. The Vanguard was his family now. Without thinking, Zayla rushed to the command center, his mind focused on one thing: saving the ship. He accessed the emergency backup systems, overriding the Xylarians' EMP shutdown. It was risky, and the Xylarians would certainly notice, but Xylair had made up his mind. He wasn't going to let them win. Jason, seeing what he was doing, nodded. In approval, "Do it, Zayla. Show them who we are." Zayla's hands flew over the control panels, and the Vanguard systems powered up again. Just as the Xylarians made their final push, "Fire at will," Jason commanded that the Vanguard's cannons roared back to life, and the ship fought back with renewed strength. The Xylarians had underestimated the power of loyalty underestimated. How strong a family could be when they fought together. Zayla stood at the center of the battle, knowing that whatever happened next, he had made the right choice. His past was no longer his prison. It was the human crew who had given him a new purpose, and he would stand with them, fighting not for revenge, but for the future they could build together. The battle raged on. The once calm space around Vanguard now looked like a war zone. Explosions lit up the dark void, sending shockwaves across the ship's hull. Zayla's heart beat in sync with the flashing lights of the control room as the sounds of the battle vibrated through the walls of the ship. His hands were steady at his station, but his thoughts were heavy. Even now, amidst the chaos, he couldn't shake the feeling that something darker was looming. The Xylarians, relentless and cold, fought back fiercely. Their superior numbers were beginning to show, and the Vanguard was starting to buckle under the pressure. Zayla had done everything he could to support the humans, to fight beside them. He had given his loyalty, his trust, and yet, a shadow from his past lingered, one that threatened everything he had come to value. Jason, who had once spoken so confidently about unity and loyalty, now stood by his side, his eyes steely and focused on the data streaming across the screens. "We've got to hold them off," Jason muttered under his breath. As his crew scrambled to keep the ship intact, Zayla nodded, his own thoughts a whirlwind. His heart was still torn. The Xylarians weren't just his people, they were his blood. They had raised him, trained him. Despite everything, a part of him couldn't shake the feeling that they still considered him one of their own. That made him hesitate, even now. Could he really fight against them for the humans? Was he prepared to leave his past behind completely? The vanguard fired another round of shots, knocking a Xylarian ship off course. But the attack had come at a cost. The ship's systems were starting to overload, and several crew members were beginning to lose control of critical systems. The alarms blared as the lights flickered, and Zayla's pulse quickened. The Xylarians had anticipated this. They had pushed the humans into a corner, and now it was only a matter of time before they would break through in the chaos. Zayla suddenly noticed something. A Xylarian fighter ship had broken off from the main fleet and was heading straight for the vanguard. Its trajectory was aimed directly at the bridge to the heart of the ship. Without a second thought, Zayla ran toward the emergency hatch, his breath coming fast. "Jason," he called out, but the captain didn't hear him over the noise. "Jason," the words spilled out of him, urgent. He had to warn him. He had to stop the Xylarians from ending it all with one final blow. But before he could reach the bridge, a loud, ear-piercing alarm sounded. The vanguard was in its final moments. "Everyone, brace yourselves." Jason's voice echoed over the intercom. Reached the ship's defense room just in time to see the Xylarian fighter ship close in. Panic surged through him. He couldn't let this happen. Not after everything they had fought for. He had to make a choice. His mind raced. His people, his past, everything that had brought him to this point. Was he still the alien outcast he had been before, or had he truly become one of them human? Could loyalty to the humans outweigh the blood ties that still connected him to the In a split second, he made his decision. His fingers flew over the controls, overriding the ship's defense systems. He activated the ship's external cannons, positioning them directly at the incoming Xylarian fighter. The ship's targeting systems locked on. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The Xylarians, his people, were closing in, their weapons charged. And yet, Xylar stood there, no longer the confused alien he once was, but a soldier in a war he had chosen to fight. The fighter ship was only moments away, but Xylar's finger hovered over the button. With one final breath, he pressed it. The blast was deafening. The Xylarian fighter ship disintegrated in the blink of an eye. Its twisted wreckage floating in space. The vanguard's shields flickered, but the impact was minimal. Jason's crew had managed to divert the blast, but the immediate threat was gone. For now, they had won. But Zayla didn't feel victorious. As the dust settled, his eyes slowly turned to Jason, who stood in the doorway, his face hard and unreadable. "You did it," Jason said, his voice surprisingly calm. "You saved us." Zayla met Jason's gaze, but the words stuck in his throat. He had saved the ship, but at what cost? The Xylarians were still out there, and worse, his betrayal had just begun. He had made a choice, and that choice would change everything. He had killed his own people, his blood, and the weight of that decision pressed down on him like 1,000 tons. Jason took a step closer, his eyes scanning Xyla's face, trying to understand. "You're one of us now, Xyla. No turning back." But Xyla's eyes were distant. He had chosen to save the humans. He had chosen them over everything else. He had betrayed his past, betrayed his heritage. He wasn't sure if he could ever forgive himself for that, no matter how right it had felt in the moment. As the ship continued to navigate through the wreckage, Jason placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did what needed to be done. Don't let them make you doubt it." But Zayla couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest part of the battle was still ahead. Not the fight against the Xylarians, but the fight within himself. "Maybe," Zayla muttered, his voice barely above a whisper, "but I wonder if it was the right choice." Jason said nothing. but his silence was enough. The vanguard had survived. Another battle, but the war within Xyla was far from over. The days that followed the battle were quieter, but the silence weighed heavily on the vanguard. The crew was patched up, and their spirits had been bolstered by the victory. But there was still an unspoken tension in the air. Xyla walked the halls of the ship, his feet heavy with uncertainty. He had saved them, but the price he had paid was becoming clearer with each passing moment. The Xylarians were not just enemies, they were his people. His blood. Jason had given him a second chance, but Xyla wasn't sure if he deserved it. Every time he looked at the crew, every time, he felt their warmth and camaraderie. Something gnawed at him. Could he truly live with the weight of the choices he had made? Could he ever truly let go of his past, or was he forever bound to the betrayal he had caused? That night, after everyone had settled, Xyla stood alone in the observation deck. The stars outside were distant and cold, just like the feelings that simmered within him. The ship's hum filled the silence, but even that sound couldn't drown out the thoughts in his head. He had chosen humanity, but at what cost? He had taken a life. He had taken the lives of his own people. There was no undoing that, but Jason's words echoed in his mind. Words that had given him a sense of purpose when everything felt lost. Loyalty isn't about blood, it's about who you choose to stand with. Maybe that was the truth. Maybe, for the first time, Xyla could see a future not bound by the people who had discarded him, but by the family he had chosen. A voice broke through his thoughts, soft yet steady. He turned to find Myra standing in the doorway, her expression warm but cautious. "Can we talk?" He nodded, though he wasn't sure if he could put his feelings into words. Myra stepped inside, her eyes taking in the quietness that seemed to hang around him. "You've been distant," she said, her tone gentle. "I get it. I've seen the way you've been carrying this. The Xylarians aren't just enemies, they're your past. But you've got to understand something, Xyla. You're not the person who abandoned you. You're not your people's choices. You're who you choose to be now." Xyla glanced away, his gaze fixed on the stars outside. "I made a choice, Mira," he said, his voice strained, "and I can't help but wonder if it was the right one. I've done things I can't take back. I've killed my own kind." Mira stepped closer, her presence calm yet unwavering. "Won't pretend it's easy, but I've seen what you've done for this crew. I've seen the way you fought for us, how you've chosen to protect humanity. That takes more strength than anything you left behind." Xyla met her gaze, his chest tightening. "But it doesn't make the past go away. How can I live with that?" "You live with it by choosing what matters now," Mira replied, her voice firm but compassionate. "You've already chosen, Xyla. You've chosen us. You've chosen family. And that's more than most people ever get." Xyla looked down at his hands, the same hands that had fired the weapon that destroyed a part of his heritage. He felt the weight of his decision pressing down on him again, but this time he didn't feel the same surge of guilt. Maybe it was because, deep down, he knew that this fight wasn't just about survival. It wasn't just about choosing sides. It was about finding his place in the universe, a place where he was accepted, not because of his past, but because of who he had become. "I'm sorry," he muttered, more to himself than to Myra. "I never wanted to hurt anyone, but I don't know what else to do." Myra reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to apologize. You've made your choice, and we're here with you. No one's asking you to be perfect, Xyla. Just be part of this family, and that's enough." Her words resonated deep within him, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Zayla felt the tightness in his chest loosen. He wasn't perfect. He wasn't flawless. But he didn't have to be. The Vanguard wasn't just a ship. It was a place where broken things could be fixed, where outcasts could find a home. The next morning, the crew gathered for their final briefing. The Xylarians had retreated for now, but they wouldn't stay gone forever. Jason stood at the front of the room, his eyes scanning the faces of his crew. He looked to Xyla, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Xyla had made his choice, and Jason knew it wasn't easy, but he was ready to move forward, just as the rest of them were. "All right," Jason said, breaking the silence. "We've had our victories, but the war's far from over. The Xylarians are regrouping, and they'll be back, stronger than before. But I don't want to hear anyone talking about us and them anymore. We're all part of this. We're all part of the Vanguard." The room fell silent, but the words lingered in the air. Solid and clear. Unity, strength, family. Zallar felt a weight lifting off his shoulders. He wasn't an outsider anymore. He wasn't an alien. He was part of something bigger than himself. Something worth fighting for. The past was no longer his chain. It was a lesson. And now he had the power to shape his future, to choose what kind of person he would become. As the crew prepared for the next mission, Zayla stood at the front of the room, his chest filled with pride. His loyalty had been tested, and he had chosen where he belonged. And though the battle ahead would be hard, he knew one thing for certain. No matter what happened, he would fight for the Vanguard. He would fight for the humans who had given him a chance, for the family that had accepted him as one of their own. The Vanguard was his home now, and together they would face whatever came next.